Hi, and welcome back to the little corner of my kitchen where I thought we might do a little bit of baking together. So, bread. Everybody thinks bread's really difficult to make, and there's a knack to it, most definitely. But if you want to make some little bread rolls, they're not too difficult, and that's what I thought we might do today. However, what have I got here? This is my children's favourite thing to eat ever, and this and bread rolls make something quite delightful. So what we're going to make today is we're going to make some bread and chocolate pinwheels. Amazing. So for this recipe we're going to need some flour, and it's a different type of flour. It's called strong flour, and if you look at the front, this one's called strong white bread flour. Being a food teacher, I had some of this in, so I've got rather a big bag, as you can see. If you can't get any, actually at a push, plain flour will do for this particular recipe, because you're not looking for a huge rise. And the difference between plain flour and strong flour is literally the amount of gluten inside it. So you generally find that this type of flour is grown in a hotter country and imported. So we're going to need 250 grams of this, which I've already weighed out. I'm just going to put that out there for a second. So I've already weighed that out, and I'm going to put it straight into a bowl. And into that, and this is really important because without it, it does taste rather bland. I need a tiny bit of salt. It sounds very strange to have salt in a sweet recipe, but it needs it. And so I'm going to put what I would call a pinch of salt in. It's literally the tiniest amount. If I was to measure it on a teaspoon, I don't think I've got a teaspoon to hand, unfortunately. No, if I was going to measure it on a teaspoon, it might be a quarter, if that. So I'm going to pop that in. And then I've got this, and this is fast action yeast. And fast action yeast is yeast that's been freeze dried, so it means that it's not doing anything now, but when we wake it up by adding the stuff that it needs, it's going to be doing its job for us rather nicely. So I'm going to pop all this in, and if you have a different container that's not measured out for you already, this is about 7 grams, the recipe says. This is 11. I'm going to sling it in anyway, because I ain't about to try and measure out 4 grams and ditch it. We also need a little bit of fat for this recipe, and I'm going to use some margarine, and I'm not even going to weigh it, I'm just going to wing it. If you want, you can use butter, you could use a little bit of oil, preferably not olive or sesame because it tends to have a taste to it, so like sunflower oil would work well. And we want about 30 grams. Now I'm going to wing this. Bearing in mind that the only pub quiz question I ever got right ever for Wealth Comprehensive School was how much does the average egg weigh? 60 grams. Only one I ever got right. So if you can think of an egg, a chicken's egg or a cream egg, we want about half that. So literally about that much. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit more or a little bit less, it won't matter. These won't be around long enough for anybody to look at them and tell you whether it's right or wrong, that's for sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub that in, and by rubbing in, what I mean is putting the tips of our fingers into the bowl and just rubbing the fat into the flour. And if you've got oil, clearly you won't have to rub it in, stir it in. Some people melt the butter for this bit, can't really be bothered. I'm going for easy. Okay, so when that's rubbed in, we'll find that there's no big bits anymore. Sometimes you find a big bit that you didn't think was still there, so a quick top tip from me is if you just give it a little shake like that, then all the big bits come to the top, so I can see there that I've missed a couple. But other than that, that's fine. Now, I have got some water, and this water is tepid, and tepid means it's neither hot or cold. It's kind of hand hot. So if I stick my finger in there, my finger doesn't register that it's hot or cold because it's the same temperature as me. So what we're on about is like a bath water that you've let go a bit cold, and you come and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can have that, I'm going to have to let a bit out and put more hot water in, that kind of thing, okay? Now, I've measured out here 200 millilitres, knowing that I'm not going to need that amount. I'm going to need about 120 to 130, but it really does depend on the type of flour that you use in the brand. Also depends on how long you've had the bag open. So, as with many things in cooking, I can't tell you specifically, exactly, but I can tell you what it looks like so you can make your own decision when you get there. Using a round bladed knife, the type of knife that you would eat with, so that cuts through the mixture opposed to a wooden spoon or similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of water and stir, just a splash each time, and stir, a little bit more and stir. It's very easy at this point to add too much water and end up with slime, which I'm sure some of you have tried to make, but this is not the recipe for slime. So just a little bit at a time. There we go. And I know I'm not going to need all that, so I know that for definite. So I'm not going to just sling it all in. There's a fine line between too wet and too dry for a bread dough. Too wet and you'll find that it's very difficult to knead because it's sticky. Too dry and you'll find that it's very difficult to knead because it's really hard. And also it doesn't rise particularly well. And that's because part of the job for the yeast is to release a gas which is called carbon dioxide, and it does that when it's got the things that it needs, and it needs some food, which in this case is the sugar, which is found naturally inside the flour, and it needs water, which we've given it, and it also needs heat, which we've given it in the same sense. And so when that happens and it's got all the things it needs, we need a nice stretchy dough for that carbon dioxide to be able to kind of pump up a little bit, like lots of different tiny balloons. And if the dough is too dry and it hasn't got enough water, then that dough isn't stretchy enough. So we've kind of got to walk a fine line. A little bit like with scones, if you've ever made scones, this is the kind of thing that at this point I'd swap to my hand, because I'm literally trying to now just kind of suck up all the dry bits with this nice bit of dough here, but as you can see there's still a little bit left in the bowl, so I'm trying to kind of stick it to itself without adding too much water. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of water left there. I'd estimate that that's about 45 millilitres of water left, maybe a little bit more, and there is my bread dough. So at this point I'm going to knead it, and to knead it you do have to put a little bit more flour on the table because it's going to stick, because the inside bit's still quite sticky. This is easier if you stand up, to be quite honest, because you can put your weight behind it, but I'm trying to do this sat down today due to the limitations of trying to video myself at home. I haven't got one of those nice big tables that I have at school, so I'm doing it sat down, which is making it slightly more difficult. There is no right and wrong way to knead bread. People get very precious about it, and they watch people like Paul Hollywood on the television and decide that there's a specific way. There isn't a way particularly. All you're doing is just trying to stretch the whole thing. So I tend to use that part of my hands, which is the heel of my hands, and I tend to use the fact that it is now sticking to the table a little bit. It'll move, but it kind of tacks to the table, and I use that as a means of the can't speak while I do it. Maybe I'll do it and then tell you. Do it as a means of kind of trying to pull it apart and then pushing it back on itself. Doing it, pull it apart and pushing it back on itself. The friction of the bread dough against the table is kind of the action that I'm after there. As you can see, lockdown has left me not particularly fit, and also this is doing wonders for my bingo wings because I'm not stood up. So I want to do this for about 5 minutes. You can already see that is different. It's smoother, look, and it's already starting to stretch. In fact, if you stretch it at this point, you can see the little strands of gluten forming, which are proteins within the wheat that are starting to chain together and form like a long piece of elastic. So if you can do this for longer than I'm going to do it, that would be good. I'm not about to do it for that long because A, I'm going to end up a big sweaty mess, and B, no one wants to watch me kneading bread on a video for 5 minutes. So I'm going to pretend now that is kneaded as I want to, as I would like it. You know when it's fully kneaded because it's smooth and it's smooth to the touch, and so this is not that bad. It's not brilliant, but it's not that bad. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to roll it out. So a little bit more flour, and I've got a rolling pin. Incidentally, if you would like to make a pizza at home, this is what you start with. I'd probably make this into 2 pizzas, or else it'd get a bit thick. Cut it in half, roll it out. A little bit of pizza topping sauce. If you wanted to make your own, you could do. You could also use any leftover pasta sauce that your mum might have used the day before, something like that. Okay, so I am going to roll mine out into about the same size and shape as that. This is not as easy as it sounds, and it doesn't have to be perfect. But what I do want, if I can help it, is I want corners. And I find that the best way to make corners out of it is to kind of pull it at the corners, like so. So that, as you can see, look, I've almost got a rectangle shape there now. For those of you that have ever made puff pastry pinwheels, if you attend my school, then this is a very similar method from here on in that what I'm going to do now, happy with that, is I'm going to spread it with chocolate. Yeah. So I'm going to need about 2 tablespoons full of chocolate spread. It could be Nutella, it doesn't have to be. It can be, you know, Tesco's own brand or whatever. This bit, oh, look at that. This bit has the tendency to get a bit messy. So I would say that if you've got a mum and dad a little bit like me, who's a bit precious about their kitchen, probably better to just make sure that this is not going to get anywhere, because chocolate spread does have a tendency to get everywhere. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just spread it all up. Oh my goodness, look at that. Yes. And I'm going to make sure I try and spread it to the edges too, because you'll see why in a minute, that when I roll it up and I want to cut it apart, what I don't want is I don't want the edge ones to have any less chocolate in it than the middle ones. So I'm trying to get myself right to the edge. Oh my god, look how nice it is. And then I'm going to roll it up. So I'm going to roll it from the thinnest side. So rolling it, rolling it, rolling it, rolling it, rolling it. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to cut it into 8. So I'm going to take my sausage shape, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to like mark it, just in case I do it wrong. So I'll mark it there, so that's 2, and then I'll do half of each one of those 2, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll do half of each quarter. And I've not cut through, I'm just marking it in case I do it wrong. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. So now what I can do is I can cut them apart. When you cut them apart, it does tend to squish it a bit. Don't worry, because as you'll see when I put them onto the baking tray, I'm going to press them down anyway, because they're pinwheels, you see. So actually I'm going to bake them that way up. Now it becomes clear. So I've got 8. I've got to fit them on this tray, which is going to be a bit tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 6 like a dice. 1, 2, 3. Dropped one. And 3 on top. This is kind of easier if I'm not doing it under my chin, but hey ho. There we are. And then the final 2 are going to go in between like that. I'm just going to pop it on the table while I push them down. You'll see that what you do is you really do flatten them. I'll hold it up for you again in a minute. It looks a right mess at this point. Bear with. Because when it's baked, so nice. Right, okay, that's how it looks now. I'm totally covered in chocolate. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put that in the top part of my oven. Now, at my house and at school, we've got an oven at the bottom and then a grill at the top. And when the grill isn't on but the oven is, it's just mildly warm. And that's a really good place for things like this to rise, because we have to let bread rise before we bake it. If you haven't got that at home, then, because rising takes about 10 to 15 minutes in somewhere warm like that. If it's ambient temperature, like the temperature of the room, then you're going to leave it for half an hour to rise up. When it's risen and it's a little bit bigger, bang it in the oven, and when it's done, it should sound hollow underneath. So you'll pick it up like that. This is not working because it's raw, and you'll tap it on the underneath and you will find that it sounds a bit hollow. I'll post a picture of what they look like when they're done in the comments. I've got to switch my phone off now with my elbow. Okay, I'm just going to go for it.